Considering the kind of videos I usually make on this channel, I wouldn't be surprised if I give off the impression that I haven't watched anything made after 2003. Which, yeah, there is some truth to that. I'm usually, if not always, late to the bandwagon, and I feel little to no pressure to watch things when they're hot and new, and I like to get into a story knowing that there will be a satisfying conclusion at the end. Maybe that's because I don't have the patience for a weekly upload schedule, maybe it's because I'm nostalgic for the style and storytelling in traditional animation, or maybe it's because I've been consistently betrayed by terrible anime endings that I no longer have it in me to take a chance on something new in case it ends in a trash fire. But regardless, I have seen some new-ish animated shows that I really liked this year, and also technically from last year, but that still counts, that's still new for me. As a heads up, this list won't cover everything I've recently seen because there were shows I liked that I just didn't feel like I had anything substantial enough that I felt like I needed to talk about them. Like, Encanto and the new season of Demon Slayer were both great, and while Belle had way more plot than it could manage, the point of that film was to be a musical, and the music did its job perfectly. There are also some shows I'm really looking forward to watching this year that have either just come out, like the third season of Kaguya Love is War, or have been announced but haven't come out yet. Like the third and probably final season of Mob Psycho 100 and the anime adaptation of Spy Family. Since the trope of found family and new parents struggling to raise a rambunctious child are some of my favorite tropes of all time. Also, Witch Hat Atelier just announced a couple of days ago that it's getting an anime adaptation, and I'm totally over the moon about that. And I just learned that a year ago, Studio Wit, which made the OVA for The Girl from the Other Side, successfully funded a Kickstarter for a feature-length animation. So I actually have a lot of series to look forward to and that I've been waiting a long time for. And I have been meaning to watch Arcane, I just haven't gotten around to it yet. But to peel back the curtain a little bit, the video I was originally going to release around the end of March/early April is creeping up into being a half-hour long, and honestly, I just need a bit more time to work on it. Hopefully, I will be able to release that around the end of this month or the beginning of next month, but fingers crossed. So instead, for now, here's a top 5 list of some animated series that I've really enjoyed watching this year and would definitely recommend. I know Ranking of Kings is probably already at least somewhat on your radar since it received a nomination for Anime of the Year in the Crunchyroll Anime Awards. And I know that, logically speaking, I should put it somewhere in the middle of this list for the sake of audience retention. But if there's only one show on this list that you actually consider watching, I think I want it to be this one. Personally, I'm always really wary of popular anime, especially shonen anime, because my tastes and what I enjoy are usually pretty different from the anime community as a whole, and I usually only have the patience for about one shonen battle anime at a time, which has currently been taken up by Demon Slayer. But in what is probably an unsurprising twist, much like everyone else, Ranking of Kings is absolutely one of my favorites so far, and definitely deserves being ranked as one of the best anime of 2022, even this prematurely into the year. Shonen protagonists are filled with scrappy, happy-go-lucky, stupid underdogs because, come on, we all love to see people triumph in the face of adversity. But in this case, the level of adversity that has to be overcome is bonkers. Butchie has almost every card in the deck stacked against him. Butchie is the crown prince of his kingdom in a land where kings are ranked on a scale of 1 to 100 based on their level of power. And while he is a sweet, sweet, precious baby boy, at like 1.5 feet tall, he's not very strong and pretty naive, which is all pretty standard shonen fare. But what isn't standard is that he's also deaf and mute. And it isn't a gimmick or hand-waved at any point. He and several other characters have to use actual sign language to communicate, and while Butchie can lip read, if a character is wearing a mask or standing behind him, he can't understand them. I haven't seen disability representation this good in a shonen battle protagonist since Fullmetal Alchemist, and even that series had some cheats. Automail is still very much a sci-fi prosthetic with the amount of range and movement it can do. Butchie does have one friend who can magically understand him and acts as his translator, but that's it. It would have been so easy to give Butchie a constant inner monologue as a crutch so that the audience could hear what he's thinking, and the fact that they chose not to is really cool. What I think has charmed so many people about Ranking of Kings is that, in so many shonen battle anime, the solution to conflict is just by doing your best. You'll definitely succeed if you work hard enough and train a little more, and if that doesn't work out, try hitting the thing even harder! And inevitably, it always works out in the end. But the thing is, Bochi is already doing his best. And the awful truth is that his best isn't enough. And more than that, it will never be enough. Due to the circumstances of his birth, there are some things that he physically cannot achieve no matter how hard he tries. He can't fix his problems by simply trying harder. What he needs is the support and understanding from others so he can solve problems his own way by excelling at the things he's actually really good at. Boji is absolute Kirby levels of baby, and it's impossible not to root for him. But even putting all of that aside, the animation is stunningly beautiful, and the art style is sort of reminiscent of Showa-era manga where characters are extremely stylized. A character can be as big or as small or as weird as they need to be as long as it serves the impression of the character, and honestly, I love it. There's no same face syndrome, there are tons of built men with completely different face and body shapes, and surprisingly, the same more or less goes for the women. There is so much crying, and it's not limited to the women or child characters. There are grown-ass men weeping in practically every episode, and I am living for it! Like Mob Psycho 100, the manga, while definitely charming, doesn't seem like it was picked up for its art, which makes sense because the story and world building are really solid. The world is surprisingly vivid and brutal and terrible, and I'm really looking forward to learning more about it. Usually, I'm not a fan of series with a large cast because if we, the audience, are suddenly dropped into the story and we never learn more than surface-level information about them, then the world ends up being filled with a lot of underdeveloped characters. But thankfully, the story takes its time to make it abundantly clear that almost every character has their own values and shared history. These characters have been living together for years, so of course they have bonds and relationships and history with more than just one other person. Like, this dude's horse gets a backstory via flashback. It still is a shonen battle series, so there is a certain amount of tropes and bloodshed that one just has to bear with. There are only a handful of female characters, which is a shame, but it's just something that comes with the territory of the genre. And if given the choice between two options of having a lot of underdeveloped female characters, or a couple really important, well-written women, I basically always prefer the latter. Queen Healing is maybe one of my favorite characters, and I love the way that motherhood is treated with such importance in the story. Overall, I really enjoyed it, and I couldn't stop myself from slamming through the entire anime, so I feel very satisfied, and I'm also looking forward to more eventually. Now, the next entry on this list is nowhere near as popular as Ranking of Kings, so it feels kind of unfair to put them back to back. But if you like my channel and like listening to the things I talk about, you'll probably also really enjoy Blue Period. Blue Period starts when some punk listlessly coasting through life in his sophomore year of high school woke up one day and thought, hey, you know what? I think I'm gonna go to art school, which, speaking from experience, is an objectively terrible decision, and I love it. Blue Period effortlessly captures the artistic experience on both a technical and emotional level. On the one hand, there's a lot of information on technique and actual applications of traditional mediums, like how the underpainting is basically the skeleton of an oil painting. But it also really accurately shows the experience of taking an art class for the first time. How when you're first starting out, even if you can't draw at all, the difference between the first and last day of a semester is mountains apart in terms of skill level. One, because you're putting the work in every day, and two, being surrounded by other artists watching their work and receiving personalized feedback and being able to ask questions helps you learn in a more active way than by practicing alone. How that one teacher can totally change your life just by giving you a little push in the right direction. And on that personal level, it also vividly captures so many of the feelings that artists go through. There's some really accurate surface level stuff, like the part after class where he's lying in bed bemoaning about how much his back hurts. Ooh, if that ain't the artistic experience, I don't know what is. But beyond that, every artist knows how frustrating it is to have someone compliment you by praising you for being talented when you know that that's not true. It's not talent, it's work and practice and a lifetime of slow, painstaking self-improvement through trial and error. Every artist knows how demoralizing it is to compare your growth to others because there's always a bigger fish, and comparing yourselves to others instead of your own growth is a trap. And obviously, I'm really biased because I'm an illustrator who also decided that it was worth going to an art school despite it being one of the shakiest, least successful, low-paying industries, only slightly worse off than being a YouTuber. But there was never anything else I ever wanted to do with my life, so one way or another, I had to do it. And I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who feel the same way. You know the old adage, love what you do and you'll never work a day in your life? I can't say I really agree with that. Frankly, I feel much more strongly with Brian David Gilbert's take on that subject.
I love what I do, and let me tell you something. I've worked some days.
But I also really like Blue Period's take on this, that hardworking people who do what they love are the strongest. Even if a show about art doesn't seem like it's your thing, I think passion can make something, really anything, compelling. Even if it's not something you'd be personally interested in, Blue Period is absolutely brimming with passion, and that passion is infectious. The characters and story are enjoyable, but they aren't really the focus. The anime is about making art and the artistic process and journey, and everything else is a vehicle to showcase all of that. And it also has some surprisingly really nice genderqueer representation, so that was an unexpectedly nice treat for me. Although, as a word of warning, if you're sensitive to issues concerning mental health and transphobia, I would approach this series with caution. Near the end, there's some pretty heavy stuff involving Yuka's home life and mental health, and while everything more or less works out, it can still be pretty upsetting to watch. Out of curiosity, I watched part of both the subs and dubs, and overall, the English dub seemed to handle the way Yuka was portrayed a little bit better. In episode 3, Yatora becomes a little bit closer to Yuka, and immediately afterwards starts using they/them pronouns to refer to them. And there are just a lot of little changes like that in the language used in English that I think were a big improvement. Overall, still definitely a treat to watch. Which is funny considering that the next film on this list was the complete opposite of a treat. Apparently, The House isn't categorized as a horror film and is billed instead as a dark comedy, which seems deeply wrong to me considering that it is a terrifyingly unsettling experience. The House is a stop-motion adult animated film that features 3 separate animated shorts that take place in different time periods and universes, and the only connected through line is that they all take place in the same definitely cursed house. Did I enjoy watching The House? No. Why is it on this list? Because there isn't anything else like this out there, and I want more of it. Stop-motion animation, even compared to 2D and CG animation, not only carries the reputation of being a lesser art form fit only for the unrefined taste of children, but even compared to the dwindling production of 2D animated series in comparison to CG, there's barely any stop-motion works being made. Aardman Animations and Studio Laika are basically the only studios still creating stop-motion films, and they barely manage to make one every couple of years, because they are a labor of love to make and have been less well-received over time. Stop-motion animation isn't even really my thing, but there are a lot of things I like about it. I love Wallace and Gromit to death for its adorable miniature nature, and while not actually stop motion, the aesthetics used in the 2019 Link's Awakening remake evoke that same adorable feeling of playing in a toy box. But if I had to pick which stop motion films are the most effective, they would be films like Coraline, The Nightmare Before Christmas, and Paranorman. Stop-motion animation is actually a match made in heaven for horror, because it naturally has this surreal, otherworldly, uncanny valley feeling that comes from the jerky nature of having sculpted figures move. In animation, the line between what is real and what isn't is much more fluid and blurred than in comparison to live action. You can stretch more in animation, you can make things that don't exist real and tangible and move in a way that is much more difficult to convey in live action. At the core of any monster film, part of you knows that the monster isn't real. It's a puppet, or a man in a suit, or CGI. And over time, audiences have become more accustomed to industry standards, and those old monsters seem less convincing and less real. But in animation, the monster is exactly as real as everything else. On a technical level, the set design and lighting are extremely cinematic and very impressive. Almost everything was shot in camera, so there are very minimal uses of green screen and digital compositing. There are a few scenes and set pieces that had to be done digitally, like the fog and water effects, but the fact that almost everything else, including the fire, were created by someone's hands in the physical world is just really cool. The first and last segments were my favorites, and basically, if you're on the fence about this, my advice would be to use your own discretion. I literally only watched this one because I wanted to see an adult animated horror film in stop-motion animation, and I wasn't disappointed, but I was definitely horrified. I was still able to sleep afterwards though, which is how I measure my metric for scary stuff. If I can still sleep afterwards, then it's fine. And if you want to give yourself a whiplash, then the next one is perfect because the Cuphead Show is just good, clean fun, and it knows it. Based on the 2017 run-and-gun video game, which was aesthetically modeled as a love letter to old-timey rubber hose animation, right down to the shiny metal eyelids, the film grain, the slightly washed-out watercolor backgrounds, the expressions, the absolute absurdity of the premise, cartoony sound effects for emphasis, even the weird shoe nub are all reminiscent of the period, but without any of the extensive baggage that era carries with it. The animation is just a joy to look at. Everyone is so slippery and bouncy. The actual devil shows up in the first episode singing about how evil he is while he slithers along the floor like the Grinch. It's filled with tons of references and homages to an older era of animation, which makes it very fun to watch for any animation buffs. The backgrounds are usually illustrations, but sometimes they switch into physical sets for more complicated panning shots, and it creates a really cool effect. Usually, I prefer shows that have a little more character or narrative substance, but that's not what Cuphead is about. Cuphead knows what it is, and it isn't trying to be anything different. The comedy isn't exactly my thing. Cuphead himself can be a little more screamy than would be to my liking, but unlike everything else on this list, Cuphead is a cartoon obviously meant to be enjoyed by kids, so I can't complain that Cuphead and Mugman are filled with childlike energy. Besides, the animation vibes alone are entirely enough of a reason to watch this show. There are plenty of visual gags that I did really enjoy, like Cuphead just dropping a fish into his cup head, or when Elder Kettle just picks Cuphead up by the handle and moves him like he's a normal cup. Each episode is split into 2 10-minute shorts, so the series is really easy to slam through, which is more or less what I did, but I think pacing yourself and just watching them 1 or 2 at a time would probably keep the series feeling a bit more fresh. Cuphead is exactly what it promises. If you're looking for fun and a dash of heebie-jeebies, pack your bags and go. Welcome to the Cuphead Show. Which brings me to the last and possibly most cringe thing on this list, but, well, what can I say? I may be cringe, but I'm free. So, okay, I saw Helluva Boss floating around for a while and pegged it as an edgy Tumblr series for teens. I mean, the original pilot series Has Been Hotel, made by the same team, even manifested a Tumblr sexy man. So I figured it wasn't for me, and I happily moved on with my life. Or at least I thought I did, until a couple of months ago, when the new episode dropped, and out of context, I saw this robot demon clown, voiced by the actual Broadway actor for Beetlejuice, just having a wonderful time with his at least 10-foot tall partner, just crushing it with this smooth, jazzy villain song. And at that point, I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? Just not watch the show about gay demons? To be fair, my initial vibe check of the series was half right. I don't and have never liked shows about terrible people doing terrible things, and the first couple episodes are more or less exactly like that. The show is about demons in hell, and the main cast are professional imp assassins for hire. They are not nice people in any sense of the word, and there is a certain amount of unavoidable gratuitous violence that really just does nothing for me. But if you can make it past those first couple of episodes, and also episode 4, as the series goes on, it becomes clear that Terrible Boss and professional garbage man Blitz really does care for the people around him enough that they are literally his found family. In a situation where caring for people is a weakness that will get you murdered. Comedy is good. Comedy is fine. But a comedy that genuinely cares about its characters enough that it can also break your heart That's something really special. I will never get tired of that. The series isn't perfect, but it is completely unapologetic for what it is. The art style is so bright and fun, and it's also really refreshingly gay. And they got me with that gay demon dad drama, alright? The majority of the cast are gay adults, and a lot of the emotional drama is around Blitz and his many failed relationships with people. Like, I wasn't expecting at all for this series to have heart, but clearly it was made with a lot of love. And fuck it, I'm invested. Helluva Boss is kind of like with Studio Trigger's work, where you have to adjust your expectations going in. If you don't like 10-foot-tall demons trying to make a functioning romantic relationship work in hell, this probably isn't going to be your thing. But, yeah, I guess it's my thing. So, yeah, I'm genuinely really surprised that there's so many anime titles I'm looking forward to this year. This is quite unusual for me. I hope I was able to be helpful and maybe showcase some niche works you might like, or even help eliminate some shows that you have no interest in. And with all that being said, a big thank you to my patrons. This video was made possible because of you. And welcome to my new patrons. Good with a Stain, Alyssa Herzog, and Michael Wright. Thank you for being some of the most supportive and patient people in the world. The delayed video should be out around the end or beginning of the month, but clearly I've showcased my complete inability to calculate the size of any project. Anyway, I'm signing out, and I just want to let you know that everything is going to be okay.